What's up guys, it's me Jeremy. It's been a pretty long time since Riot has released an easy champion. Now of course the word easy to describe a champion can be a little bit subjective, so in this video when I say easy, I'm really just referring to any champions that are mechanically simple without a really big learning curve for the champion's mechanics themselves. I definitely think it's fair to say that a champion can be considered easy if the difficulty or complexity of their abilities is low enough that you can reach their full potential of being able to utilize their kit without needing to spend a ton of time practicing them. So with that in mind, I kind of wanted to explore some of the more straightforward characters and talk about whether or not Riot should release a new easy champion into the game. And speaking of easy things, NordVPN is actually the easiest to use, most advanced VPN service that's widely accessible today, and they just so happen to be today's video sponsor. NordVPN is perfect for getting around region-locked websites and programs, or for simply just protecting your IP. NordVPN can allow you to access any website from any country and get around these region locks. It's great if you live in a country that blocks some websites on the internet, or if maybe you're just taking a vacation somewhere. They've also got more servers than any other VPN network, so you're sure to have a reliable service with them. They've got a ton of advanced features such as an automatic kill switch, a browser proxy extension, and it's guaranteed to have no impact on internet speed when using it. And they also have mobile apps so you can get the VPN service on all of your devices. And if you use the link in the description, or if you go to the website and use the coupon code JEREMY, you'll actually get 77% off of the price. Seriously, it's a total steal. They're totally hooking you guys up, so definitely check out NordVPN at the link in the description below. And big thanks to NordVPN once again for sponsoring this video, and let's jump right back into it. Now Riot recently hosted a Q&A session focused on skins and champions, and one of the questions answered was about simple champions. The questioner mentioned some of their favorite champions in the game were kind of their simple, straightforward ones, like the old pre-reworked Taric, Swain, and Cho'Gath, as well as champions like maybe Annie and Malphite, and they wanted to know if Riot had any plans to make new ones like this. Now Riot's Scruffy, who's actually the new lead game designer for League of Legends, provided the reply mentioning that there are pros and cons to simple champions, but overall they understand how important the fact that these champions exist is to the League of Legends roster, and as well how fun they can be to play. I personally myself actually enjoy playing these simple champions quite a lot, and oftentimes prefer it to more complex champions, so there's definitely a desire to play these champions in the game. Now one of the key points mentioned by Riot Scruffy was that the less time players are required to spend focusing on input in the game, the more time they can spend making strategic decisions elsewhere. So it kind of creates a shift in playstyle that can be really interesting to a lot of players, like myself, as well as potentially a lot of new players too, but the drawback is that those champions can actually become seriously strong in higher skills of play. So to get around that, Riot needs to balance them a lot more carefully, which overall does tend to make them a little bit less viable at the highest tiers of play. Riot Scruffy also mentioned that simple champions tend to fall into kind of this stat check category, which means they either completely fail or completely succeed almost entirely based on their numbers. If they're ahead in gold and items, they're just going to snowball like crazy, but when they're behind, they totally just lack the tools needed to outplay opponents and catch up. Now this poses a problem for Riot because evidently they want to produce champions with viability at the higher levels of play, and that means champions need a little bit more complexity than just relying on raw stats, because otherwise if they relied on raw stats, it often creates a situation where they're just too overpowered. And the thing is that to create counterplay in a champion, you need some level of difficulty that allows an ability to either succeed or fail, regardless of how powerful it actually is on paper. Otherwise you end up with just a bunch of point and click champions that just completely dominate and you can't really outplay them in any way, shape, or form. Think something like Taric's old stun. Now to actually answer the question, Riot Scruffy essentially said that Riot at this time has no plans to add more simple champions into the game because Riot believes there are already enough characters serving that niche. However, this actually creates another problem, is that reworks and visual gameplay updates have tended to make a lot of those simple champions more complex. Riot have said before that during these full visual gameplay updates, they'll try to keep simple champions as simple as possible, but the problem is a lot of the more basic champions just have counterplay issues as a result of the fact that they're kind of so basic to begin with, because basic abilities It's true that they don't have much room for outplay potential, but the trade-off for that is that they also don't have a lot of room for counterplay. Simple kits can be easily exploited if they don't leave much room for an ability to be misused, and fixing that issue generally does mean adding some kind of complexity. For example, Taric used to be able to just point and click stun people, but they changed it to being a line skill shot. Although it's not as high of a skill requirement as some other abilities in the game, it's definitely made him objectively a more difficult champion, and these kinds of changes happen almost every time Riot reworks a champion, especially ones that are notoriously easy, like for example Taric or Warwick as well. Now with new releases, there's also a desire to keep the game fresh, and the more new champions you add or old champions that you rework, the more Riot needs new and exciting mechanics to keep things interesting, and with 140 champions in the game, a lot of crazy new things have been needed to be implemented so that players can be excited to play the next new release. Now in their April champion roadmap, Riot mentioned that there's a lot of pressure to add new ways to play the game. They offered examples like Kane's permanent transformation, Zoe's ability to steal summoner spells, as well as the unique synergy between Xayah and Rakan. But one thing is clear, none of these new mechanics are simple. Creating original but simple ideas is actually really difficult because there's not much room to explore new ways to play the game with a simple mechanic, and with such a high standard to reach for these new champions, the unique approaches to the game are almost always going to introduce more complexity into the game, and Riot have it in mind that they will always have this base kind of initial pool of simple champions, but the thing is that reworks continue to make that pool smaller and smaller in number. All of this together really boils down into two main principles and reasons that Riot, at least for now, don't plan on releasing a new, simple, or easy champion anytime soon. First, there is an expectation for the design of new champions to reach a level that Riot believes is no longer possible to obtain with a mechanically simple champion. Secondly, they believe there are already enough champions in the game that satisfy that niche of being mechanically simple, that also cover a variety of different roles and playstyles, to the point where Riot feels there is no longer a need to add any more of those types of champions into the game. However, it should be hypothetically possible to design a champion that falls into both of those categories, which definitely does open the possibility of a new easy champion being created one day in the future. It's obvious that Riot prefers releasing more complex champions because they can explore new mechanics with them and do all sorts of crazy stuff, but there's definitely a big percentage of the population, myself included, that does really enjoy playing the easier champions in the game. Now, a big part of why they can't design champions like this is probably due to Riot's refusal to use the same mechanics again on a new champion, except in small ways, but at the end of the day, they can't keep adding new mechanics forever anyway. At some point, it's likely that they'll have to revisit older mechanics and apply them in new ways, or combine them with other mechanics. And from this perspective, it should be hypothetically possible to build a new unique champion even using simple abilities. For example, Riot might not want to create a new support with a point and click stun, a heal, a basic damage ability, and a disengage ultimate, because those things all are on other champion kits already, but they can always combine those simple abilities in new ways, or even double down on some of the designs to make a champion that is seriously good at one thing but bad at everything else, or I'm sure there's a way to design a champion that does have a mechanically simple kit, but at the same time has additional layers of complexity that apply the design features that Riot are so excited to put onto new champions. But with that said, there's really a lot of benefits as well that I've kind of ignored throughout this video up until this point for releasing a complex champion, or for making a champion more complex. You know, increasing the complexity of a champion often means that the character ends up being a lot more flexible in game. They can do well with different item builds or in different roles, they'll have a lot more outplay potential, but this is also a barrier to entry that a lot of players might not want to spend the time to practice on a character to overcome. That is to say, it's been a long time since they released a character with a somewhat one-dimensional playstyle, and Annie's a pretty good example of this. She's great at contributing both AoE and single target damage, but her mobility and defensive capabilities are both really weak. There's still a bit of skill expression because you can use her crowd control defensively, but for the most part she's just kind of a simple champion that you pick for either reliable crowd control or reliable damage, and the exciting part of playing Annie is more about the strategy of how you set up her abilities rather than the mechanics of using the abilities themselves. Now, filling niches more reliably is definitely one way that Riot could bring simple champions back into production. To make them more unique when compared to other characters, they simply need to focus more on the art direction and the narrative. A lot of people buy champions not because they like the gameplay, but because they just think the character's really cool, or they relate to the personality or appearance or something like that. For these characters, it doesn't matter how simple or complex they are, people that appreciate the design are going to be excited to play those champions. Now, this concept of reliable, simple, easy to play champions also helps promote the sort of team-focused gameplay that Riot have been constantly trying to enforce since the game started. The days of total solo carry champions are pretty far behind us, aside from the occasional ridiculous unbalanced character, but with that in mind, it doesn't actually make that much sense to develop champions that are so good in so many different ways. Creating a simple champion that offers a core advantage at the cost of flexibility could be an interesting way to make a valuable champion for team-focused games. Either way, that's going to be it for this one. I'm really curious to see what you guys think about simple champions. Do you want to see Riot release a new simple champion, or should they just focus completely on new, unique mechanics and playstyles? If you maybe have a cool idea for a simple or easy champion, especially if you can come up with a really unique, easy to use mechanic, definitely let us know in the comment section below. Either way, it looks like that's going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.